I'm Tomi Johnston. I am residential faculty here at Paradise Valley Community College in the Department of Art History. Today, I'd like to talk about this piece by Harrison Begay. He is a Diné or Navajo artist. He was born sometime between 1914 and 1917 on the Navajo Nation lands. He had a very traditional Navajo childhood, grew up in a hogan, and was a sheep and goat herder throughout his childhood. In 1934, he entered the Santa Fe Indian School in order to study art. And he did WPA work in Gallup, New Mexico, which you can still see today. He came back to Arizona and actually enrolled at Phoenix College, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight him today, since he's one of our former students. But World War II interrupted his studies there at Phoenix College. So in 1942, he joined the U.S. Army, and he was part of the D-Day invasion on Normandy beachhead. So a very great example of a World War II veteran who saw action on D-Day. I particularly wanted to talk about this piece today because it stands out very dramatically from most of the type of art that he was known to make. Some critics have called his art Disney art because a lot of his output was related to very tender and delicate renderings of children and animals, and in fact he did illustrate a couple children's books. But this piece here really shows a different side to his artistic output, and it's a very dramatic, stark black and white rendering of Monument Valley. And I really love it because it's only done in black and white. It really shows the drama of the landscape in Monument Valley, as well as the buildup of this thunderhead, which is a very familiar sight to those of us who live here in the Southwest. We see these thunderhead clouds during the monsoon build up and then hopefully shower us with rain. So he spent most of the rest of his life back on the Navajo Nation land, and he eventually did die in his 90s in Gilbert, Arizona. But because of his history with the district and that he's a proud son of Arizona, I wanted to highlight his work for you today. So now I'd like to talk about Fritz Scholder's Patriotic Indian. Fritz Scholder was born in 1937 in Breckenridge, Minnesota, and as you might guess from his name, Fritz Scholder, he was of mixed German and Native American ancestry. It wasn't until after college, actually, that he began to explore and connect to, in a more deep way, with his Native American heritage. He moved to California in 1957 with his family, and he began attending Sacramento City College. He graduated in 1960, and he joined the Rockefeller Indian Art Project at the U of A in Tucson. He was very adamant, though, that he did not want to depict Native Americans in his art. And in fact, he vowed he never would, until he gave his own students a project to depict Native Americans in one of their projects. And he was very disappointed with the results of that project because most of the students resorted to very stereotypical type imagery of Native Americans. And I have a quote here by Fritz Scholder that I'd like to read to you that I think is very meaningful to both his art and the way that he approached making art about Native American subjects. He says, quote, "People really don't like Indians. Oh, they like their own conceptions of the Indian. Usually the Plains Indian, romantic and noble and handsome, and somehow the embodiment of wisdom and patience. But Indians in America are usually poor, sometimes derelicts outside the value system, living in uncomfortable surroundings. We have really been viewed as something other than human beings by the larger society, end quote. And so it was this experience with seeing that sort of stereotyping going on in his own students that actually caused him to make his first images of actual Native Americans in his artwork. This is a very typical example, this patriotic Indian. This was made in the 1970s as America was celebrating the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the birth of the nation, and he had actually been chosen as an artist to make a depiction that represented the bicentennial. This is not that exact image, but it came out of that body of work. And you can see that this is in red, white, and blue, and is titled Patriotic Indian. And it certainly depicts a person who is very proud, but also very haggard, touching upon the issues that Native Americans face in modern American society, where they are often living at the margins, impoverished and with addiction-type problems rampant, which he was always very cognizant of. He often depicts Native Americans drinking, surrounded by beer cans or whiskey bottles or things of that nature. So he wanted to make, non-glamorous, realistic depictions of how he saw and experienced Native life as he strengthened his ties within his community. He was a member of the tribe that he had on his father's side. Before his turn to Native subjects, he was celebrated as one of the most important modern artists in America. He had studied with abstract expressionists and was known as being one of America's foremost pop and abstract expressionist artists. So he took pop art, there are definite elements of pop art in this image, the bold graphic style, the very bright colors. So he took his prestige and his prior success of being a mainstream, if you will, painter, and then turned it inward to his own heritage, to become to identify himself as a Native American artist, which he had been reluctant to do up until that point in the 60s, and then he spent the rest of his life making imagery related to how he saw the reality of Native American art in the Native American life in the United States.